The rain was falling softly on the windows of Maplewood Community Center. When Alina walked through the front doors for the first time, she pulled her old brown coat tighter around herself and looked around the lobby. The place smelled like coffee and old books. There were flyers on the walls about pottery classes, computer lessons for seniors, and something called Music for Everyone. Alina had been living in this small town for 6 months now, but she still felt like a stranger. She rented a tiny apartment above the bakery on Main Street. Every morning, she would buy coffee from Tony, the baker who always smiled and asked about her day. She would tell him she was fine, just fine, and hurry back upstairs. The truth was, Alina was not fine at all. 6 months ago, her whole world had fallen apart in New York City. She used to sing at the Metropolitan Opera House, one of the most famous places in the world for opera singers. People would pay hundreds of dollars just to hear her voice. Critics wrote amazing things about her performances. She had everything a singer could dream of. But then came the divorce. Her husband, who was also her music director, had been cheating on her with another singer. When the story hit the newspapers, it became a huge scandal. The opera world loves drama, but not the messy, painful kind that happens in real life. Suddenly, no one wanted to hire Alina anymore. They said she was too much trouble, too emotional, too unpredictable, so she ran away. She picked this small town in Ohio because it was nothing like New York. Here, nobody knew who she was. Nobody expected anything from her. She could just disappear. But after 6 months of hiding in her apartment, eating takeout food and watching old movies, Alina was getting lonely. She missed music more than she wanted to admit, not the fancy world of opera houses and designer gowns, but just the simple joy of singing. When she saw the flyer for the community music class, something inside her stirred. The classroom was on the 2nd floor, and Alina could hear voices singing as she climbed the stairs. It was not professional singing, she could tell that right away. But it was happy singing, the kind people do when they are not worried about being perfect. She stood outside the door for a full minute, listening. Part of her wanted to turn around and go home. What was she doing here? She was Alina Martinez, who had sung for presidents and movie stars. She did not belong in a community center music class, but the other part of her, the part that had been quiet for too long, pushed open the door. The room was small and bright, with folding chairs arranged in a circle. About 15 people were sitting there, ranging from teenagers to grandparents. They were singing a simple song about friendship, and most of them were reading the words from photocopied sheets. At the front of the room stood a man in his 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes. He was conducting with one hand while playing piano with the other. When he saw Alina in the doorway, he smiled and gestured for her to come in. "Please, please, come join us," he said warmly. "I'm Professor Williams, but everyone here calls me Bob. You must be the new student who called yesterday." Alina nodded and found an empty chair near the back. She had called the day before, giving only her first name and saying she was interested. In the class, now sitting among these strangers, she felt both nervous and excited. The people around her were exactly what you would expect in a small-town music class. There was Mrs. Chen, a retired librarian who had always wanted to learn to sing properly. Next to her sat Jake, a young mechanic who worked at the auto shop downtown. He had a surprisingly gentle voice for someone with oil under his fingernails. There was also Linda, a mother of 3 who came to class as her 1 hour of peace each week. She told everyone that singing was cheaper than therapy and probably more fun. Behind her sat old Pete, who was actually only 55, but had been called Old Pete since high school. He had a deep bass voice that rumbled like distant thunder. As the class continued, Alina found herself relaxing. These people were not trying to impress anyone. They were just having fun with music. When Bob asked everyone to introduce themselves and share why they wanted to learn to sing, Alina listened to their simple, honest answers. "I want to sing at my daughter's wedding," said Mrs. Chen. "My girlfriend says I sound like a dying cow, so I figured I should get some help," joked Jake, making everyone laugh. "I used to sing in church when I was little, and I miss it," said Linda quietly. When it was Alina's turn, she felt all eyes on her. For a moment, she panicked. What could she say? That she used to be famous? That she had sung on stages around the world? That she was hiding from a life that had broken her heart? Instead, she said simply, I'm Alina. I moved here recently, and I enjoy singing. I have some experience with classical music. Bob nodded encouragingly. Wonderful. Classical training is always helpful. What kind of classical music do you enjoy? Alina's throat felt tight. Oh, the usual stuff. Opera, mostly. If Bob noticed that she looked uncomfortable, he did not push. Instead, he moved on to the next person. Alina was grateful for his kindness. The rest of the class was spent learning basic breathing techniques and simple scales. Alina had to stop herself from automatically using the advanced techniques she had learned years ago. She tried to sing. Like a beginner, but even holding back, her voice had a richness that made a few people glance her way. After class, Alina hurried toward the door, but Bob called out to her. Alina, do you have a minute? She stopped, worried that he had figured out who she was. But when she turned around, his expression was simply curious. I could not help but notice that you have a lovely voice, he said. Have you had formal training? Alina chose her words carefully. A long time ago. Bob smiled. Well, if you are comfortable with it, I might ask you to help some of the newer students. We're always looking for people who can demonstrate proper technique. Oh, I do not think I'm ready for that, Alina said quickly. I'm pretty rusty. Of course, no pressure at all. Just wanted you to know that you are welcome here, no matter what your background is. Something in his voice told Alina that he sensed she was running from something. But instead of prying, he was simply offering her a safe place to land. It had been so long since anyone had shown her that kind of gentle understanding. Walking home in the soft rain, Alina felt something she had not experienced in months. It was not happiness exactly, but it was not the heavy sadness that had become her constant companion either. It was possibility, back in her small apartment. She made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window looking down at the quiet street. For the first time since leaving New York, she hummed a little tune. It was nothing fancy, just a simple melody that had popped into her head, but it was a start. 3 weeks had passed since Alina first walked into Bob's music class, and she was starting to feel like she belonged somewhere again. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, she would climb those familiar stairs to the bright classroom where her new friends waited. Mrs. Chen had started saving her a seat, and Jake always greeted her with a cheerful wave. Linda would share stories about her kids, and old Pete had begun telling everyone his collection of terrible singing jokes. Alina found herself actually laughing for the first time in months. She was careful, though, very careful, when they practiced. Scales, she would only sing at about half her real ability. When Bob asked for volunteers to demonstrate breathing techniques, she would politely decline. She was like a race car driver, pretending to be learning how to drive a regular car. It took all her self-control not to let her true voice slip out, but Bob was not stupid. Alina could see him watching her sometimes, his head tilted slightly like a dog hearing a distant sound. During one class, when they were practicing a simple folk song, Alina forgot herself for just a moment. A single note came out with the full power and beauty of her trained voice. The whole room went quiet for a second, and Alina quickly brought her voice back down to beginner level. Bob's eyes met hers across the room, and she saw a flash of recognition there. Not that he knew who she was, but that he knew she was hiding something big. On this particular Thursday evening in October, Bob seemed unusually excited when class began. His eyes were bright, and he was moving around more than usual, right? Everyone, I have some wonderful news, he announced, clapping his hands together. The town council has asked our class to perform at the annual Maplewood Arts Festival next month. The room erupted in a mix of excitement and panic. Mrs. Chen immediately started shaking her head. Oh no, Bob, I cannot perform in front of people. I still sound like a squeaky door when I try to hit the high notes. Jake was grinning, though. This is awesome. My mom will be so proud. She's been telling everyone at the grocery store that I'm taking singing lessons. Linda looked terrified. How many people usually come to this festival? About 300, Bob said cheerfully, which made Linda turn pale. Alina felt her stomach drop. 300 people was nothing compared to the thousands who used to watch her perform at the Met, but the thought of any kind of performance made her hands shake. She had not sung in public since the disaster in New York. Now, don't worry, Bob continued. Going to assign each of you a piece that matches your current ability level, nothing too challenging. This is supposed to be fun, not stressful. Over the next 20 minutes, Bob went around the room giving out assignments. Mrs. Chen got a gentle Chinese lullaby that would showcase her sweet, soft voice. Jake received a country song that would let him use his natural charm. Linda was given a simple hymn that she already knew well from church. Alina watched and listened, hoping Bob would assign her something equally safe. Maybe a folk song, or perhaps one of the easier classical pieces they had been practicing. She could handle that without revealing too much of her true abilities. But when Bob reached her, something strange happened. Why? He paused, studying her face. For a long moment, Lena could practically see the wheels turning in his mind. Lena, he said slowly, I've been thinking about your background in classical music. Her heart started beating faster. Yes. I know you said you were rusty, but I can tell you have more training than you let on. Your posture when you sing, the way you breathe, even how you hold your mouth, these are not things you learn in casual lessons. Alina felt the blood drain from her face. Several classmates were looking at her with new interest. She had worked so hard to blend in, to be invisible. I really don't think I'm ready for anything complicated, she said quietly. Bob smiled, but there was something determined in his expression. I think you're selling yourself short. In fact, I think you're capable of much more than you realize. He walked over to his old piano and pulled out a thick book of classical music. Alina recognized it immediately. It was a collection of famous opera arias. Her mouth went dry. I'm going to give you something that will really let your voice shine, Bob said, flipping through the pages. Something that will challenge you to show what you can really do. Alina wanted to run. She wanted to grab her coat and leave and never come back. But her feet seemed frozen to the floor. Bob stopped at a page and smiled broadly. Perfect. Alina, I'm assigning you Der Heil Rauch from Mozart's Magic Flute. The room went completely silent. Even people who did not know much about opera had heard of this piece. Was the Queen of the Night aria, famous for being one of the most difficult songs ever written for the human voice. It required hitting notes so high that they were almost beyond human range and doing it while singing. Incredibly fast, complex passages. Jake was the first to speak. Bob, isn't that the song that destroys professional singers? I saw a video once where some famous lady tried to sing it and totally crashed and burned. Mrs. Chen looked worried. Alina, dear, are you sure about this? It sounds terrifying. Alina could not speak. Her throat felt like it was closing up. This was not just any difficult song. This was the most challenging piece in her entire repertoire. She had performed it dozens of times at the Met, and it had taken her years to master. It was the kind of piece that separated world-class sopranos. From everyone else, Bob was watching her reaction carefully. I know it seems intimidating, but I have a feeling about you, Lena. Sometimes we surprise ourselves with what we can do when we're pushed a little. Bob, Linda said gently, maybe that's a bit much for someone who says she's rusty. But old Pete was nodding thoughtfully. You know what? I think Bob might be onto something. Alina, I've been listening to you these past few weeks. Even when you're trying to sing quietly, there's something special about your voice. Maybe it's time to stop hiding it. Alina felt trapped. If she refused, it would look suspicious. Everyone would wonder why someone with classical training could not at least attempt a classical piece. But if she accepted, she would have to either fail miserably on purpose or reveal exactly who she was. Bob was still watching her. She could see both kindness and curiosity in his eyes. He was not trying to embarrass her, she realized. It genuinely believed she could do it. Somehow, despite her efforts to hide, he had sensed the real singer underneath her careful disguise. Double quotes, Alina started, then stopped. Her hands were shaking now. Take some time to think about it, Bob said gently. But Alina, I want you to know something. Whatever brought you to our little class, whatever you're running from or hiding from, music is supposed to heal, not hurt. Maybe it's time to trust your voice again. The words hit Alina like a physical blow. How could he know? How could this small-town music teacher see right through all her carefully built walls? The rest of the class passed in a blur. Alina barely heard the other discussions about costumes and rehearsal schedules. All she could think about was that impossible piece of music and the choice that lay before her. Walk away and stay hidden, or step back into the light and risk everything all over again. Alina walked home from class that night feeling like she was carrying a 100-pound weight on her shoulders. The October air was crisp, and the streetlights cast long shadows on the empty sidewalk. Usually, she enjoyed these quiet walks back to her apartment, but tonight, her mind was spinning like a tornado. Der Heil Rauch. Even thinking the name made her stomach clench. She had not sung that piece since her last performance at the Met almost 7 months ago. It was the night before everything fell apart, when she had still believed her marriage was solid and her career was safe. Back in her small apartment above the bakery, Alina made herself a cup of tea with shaking hands. She sat at her tiny kitchen table and stared at the wall. What was she going to do? She could quit the class. It would be easy enough. Just call Bob tomorrow and say she had changed her mind, that she was too busy or had decided music was not for her after all. She could go back to hiding, back to her safe, quiet, empty life. But the thought of disappointing her new friends made her heart ache. Mrs. Chen had been so excited about the performance.
Oh.
Despite her nerves, Jake had already started telling his family about it. Even Linda, terrified as she was, had begun practicing her hymn every day. And then there was Bob. The way he had looked at her when he assigned the piece, not with cruelty or tricks, with genuine belief. He saw something in her that she had almost forgotten existed. Alina pulled out her phone and searched for a recording of Der Heil Rauch on the internet. As the familiar notes filled her small kitchen, memories came flooding back. She remembered the first time she had attempted this piece 20 years ago in music school. Her teacher had warned her that it would take years to master, that many sopranos never managed it at all. The aria told the story of the Queen of the Night, a character consumed by rage and vengeance. The music matched the emotion, wild, dangerous, and absolutely unforgiving. It started with dramatic, sweeping phrases that seemed almost manageable, but then launched into passages that climbed higher and higher, demanding notes that felt like they were beyond human capability. Alina found herself humming along very quietly so the neighbors would not hear. Even humming, she could feel her vocal cords remembering the complex patterns, the precise breath control needed for each impossible phrase. Over the next few days, Alina was miserable. She went through her daily routine like a zombie. Tony at the bakery noticed her mood and kept offering her free pastries, thinking food might help. She was polite but distant, lost in her own thoughts. The problem was not just the technical challenge of the piece. Alina knew she could still sing it. Her voice had not lost its power during these months of hiding. The real problem was emotional. Performing this aria would mean dropping her disguise completely. There was no way to sing Der Heil Rauch halfway. It was like trying to be a little bit pregnant. Impossible. If she sang it properly, everyone would know immediately that she was not just some woman with a little classical training. They would know she was a professional, someone who had spent decades perfecting her craft. And in a small town like Maplewood, word would spread quickly. Someone would recognize her name, look her up online, and discover the whole messy story of her divorce and career collapse. But if she sang it badly on purpose, she would be lying to Bob and betraying the trust he had placed in her. Worse, she would be betraying the music itself. Alina had been raised to believe that music was sacred, that it deserved respect and honesty. A week into her internal struggle, Alina was walking past the community center when she heard piano music coming from inside. It was evening, well past class time, but she recognized Bob's playing. Curious, she peered through the window. Bob was alone at the piano, playing Der Heil Rauch and singing along in his pleasant but limited tenor voice. He was clearly struggling with the high notes, his face scrunched up with concentration and effort. But he kept going, determined to understand every part of the piece he had assigned to her. Alina felt tears spring to her eyes. Here was this kind man, probably in his 60s, trying to sing one of the most challenging pieces ever written, just so he could better help his student. He did not even know who she really was, but he was working this hard for her. That night, Alina made a decision. She could not keep running forever. She could not keep pretending to be someone she was not. But she also was not ready to reveal everything. She needed to find a middle ground. She started practicing every morning. After the bakery opened and Tony was busy with customers, Alina would put on soft music and practice breathing exercises. She had to be careful. The walls in her apartment were thin, and she did not want anyone to hear her real voice yet. In the afternoons, she would drive to a secluded spot by the lake outside town. There, surrounded by trees and water, she would let her voice stretch and soar. It felt like taking a deep breath after holding it for months. The first time she attempted Der Heil Rasch at full voice, Alina broke down crying. The music brought back so many memories, not just of her failed marriage, but of why she had fallen in love with opera in the first place. The power, the emotion, the way music could express feelings that words could never capture. Her voice was rusty at first. The high notes that used to come easily now required extra effort. The complex runs that she once performed without thinking now needed careful attention. But slowly, day by day, it was coming back as she practiced. Alina found herself thinking about the Queen of the Night character. The aria was about a mother's fury, about betrayal and revenge, about someone who had been deeply hurt fighting. Back with everything she had, Alina understood those feelings more than she wanted to admit, but she also began to understand something else. The Queen of the Night was not just angry, she was powerful. She was not hiding or running away, was standing up and demanding to be heard. 2 weeks before the performance, Alina was practicing by the lake when she heard a car door slam. Panicking, she stopped singing and looked around. Bob was walking toward her, carrying a thermos of coffee and wearing a gentle smile. "I thought I might find you here," he said calmly. Alina felt her face turn red. "Bob, I can explain, ... He held up a hand to stop her. "Alina, I've been teaching music for 35 years. I've heard a lot of voices in that time. I've never heard anyone sing like you just did, except on professional recordings." They stood there in silence for a moment, the lake water lapping softly at the shore. "I don't know who you are or what brought you to Maplewood," Bob continued. "I don't need to know unless you want to tell me. But I do know that you have a gift that shouldn't be wasted. Whatever happened to you before, whatever you're afraid of, don't let it steal your music." Alina felt the walls she had built around her heart beginning to crack. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," Bob said, kindly, "but sometimes the only way out is through." The night of the Maplewood Arts Festival arrived with a crisp November chill in the air. Alina stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. She had chosen a simple black dress, nothing fancy, nothing that would draw extra attention. Her hands trembled as she tried to apply a light coat of lipstick. For the past 2 weeks, since her conversation with Bob by the lake, Alina had been practicing every day. Her voice was stronger now, more confident. The high notes that had felt impossible were coming back to her. But tonight felt different. Tonight, there would be no hiding. She arrived at the community center an hour early, hoping to warm up in private. But the building was already buzzing with activity. Families were setting up folding chairs in the main hall. Volunteers were arranging refreshment tables, and other performers were arriving with their instruments and sheet music. Alina slipped upstairs to the music room, where she found her classmates getting ready. Mrs. Chen was pacing back and forth, humming her lullaby and wringing her hands. Jake was doing vocal exercises that sounded more like a sports warm-up than singing practice. Linda sat quietly in a corner, her eyes closed, lips moving silently as she went through him, Alina. Mrs. Chen rushed over to her. "Oh, I'm so nervous I can barely breathe." "How are you feeling?" Alina forced a smile. "A little nervous too, a little..." Jake laughed. "Alina, you're singing The Queen of the Night. I looked it up online after Bob assigned it to you. That song is insane. Professional opera singers train for years just to attempt it." "Thanks for the pep talk, Jake," Alina said dryly, which made everyone laugh despite their nerves. Old Pete walked over and patted Alina on the shoulder. "You know what I keep thinking about? That first day you came to class, how you sat in the back and barely spoke. And now look at you, about to tackle. One of the hardest songs ever written. Life's funny, isn't it? Alina nodded, not trusting herself to speak. If only he knew the whole truth. Bob appeared in the doorway, looking surprisingly calm for someone whose students were about to perform in front of 300 people. All right, everyone, it's showtime. The hall is packed, I think the whole town showed up tonight. Elena's stomach dropped. 300 had seemed manageable when it was just a number. But now, thinking about 300 pairs of eyes watching her, judging her, possibly recognizing her, she felt like she might faint. The first part of the program featured other community groups, a children's choir, high school jazz band, and a group of seniors who played folk music on guitars. Alina watched from backstage, her palms sweating as she listened to the warm applause from the audience. Then it was time for the music class. Mrs. Chen went first. Despite her nerves, she sang her Chinese lullaby beautifully. Her voice was gentle and sweet, and Alina could see people in the audience smiling warmly. When she finished, the applause was enthusiastic and supportive. Jake was next with his country song. He winked at the audience before he started, and his natural charm won them over immediately. By the second verse, people were clapping along. He finished with a grin and a small bow, clearly enjoying every second. Linda's hymn was simple but moving. Her voice cracked slightly on one high note, but she recovered gracefully. Alina could see several people in the audience wiping their eyes. The song reminded everyone of Sunday mornings and childhood memories. Old Pete's bass solo was powerful and steady, like the man himself. The deep notes seemed to vibrate through the entire building, and when he finished, several people called out, "Bravo!" Then Bob walked to the microphone. Our final performer tonight is Alina Martinez. She's been with our class for just a few months, but she's agreed to take on one of the most challenging pieces in all of classical music. Der Heilroch from Mozart's Magic Flute. Alina heard murmurs ripple through the audience. She caught fragments of whispered conversations. Isn't that incredibly difficult? I've heard of that one. It's supposed to be impossible. This should be interesting. Bob looked toward the wings where Alina was standing. Alina's been somewhat modest about her musical background, but I have a feeling we're all in for a surprise tonight. Alina's heart was pounding so hard she was sure the audience could hear it. She looked out at the sea of faces, families, friends, neighbors, all waiting expectantly. In the front row, she spotted Tony from the bakery giving her an encouraging thumbs up. Mrs. Rodriguez from the post office was there, along with the librarian who always recommended mystery novels to her. These were her people now. Not critics or wealthy opera patrons, but ordinary folks who had welcomed her into their community without asking questions. They deserved the truth, even if it scared her. Alina walked slowly to center stage. The spotlight was warm on her face, and for a moment she felt transported back to all those nights at the Metropolitan Opera. But this was different. It mattered more somehow. She nodded to Bob at the piano, and he began the opening measures. The introduction to Der Heilroch was dramatic and foreboding. Building tension for what was to come, Alina closed her eyes and let 15 years of professional training take over. When she opened her mouth to sing the first phrase, her voice filled the hall with a power and richness that made the audience sit up straighter. But this was just the beginning. The aria started with sweeping, dramatic phrases that were challenging but manageable. Alina sang them with controlled intensity, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room. The audience was already captivated. But they had no idea what was coming. As the piece built toward its famous climax, Alina felt something shift inside her. All the fear, all the pain from the past year, all the anger and hurt and disappointment, it poured into the music. Queen of the Night's Rage became her own, and her voice soared with an emotion that was raw and real. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. The legendary high notes that had defeated countless singers. Alina took a breath and launched into the impossible passages, her voice climbing higher and higher with crystalline precision. The audience was dead silent now. Alina could feel their amazement, their disbelief. She hit the famous high FA, note so high it seemed to touch the ceiling, and held it with perfect clarity and power as she navigated the final complex runs. Alina opened her eyes and looked out at the audience. Every single person was transfixed, many with their mouths hanging open. In the front row, Tony was staring at her like he had never seen her before. When the last note faded into silence, the hall remained quiet for what felt like forever. Elena stood on the stage, breathing hard, her heart racing. Then someone in the back started clapping, slowly like a wave building. The applause grew and grew until the entire audience was on their feet, cheering and shouting. Several people were wiping tears from their eyes. Others were shaking their heads in amazement. Elena felt tears streaming down her own face as she took a bow. In that moment, she realized something important. She was not hiding anymore. The applause seemed to go on forever. Elena stood on the stage, still catching her breath, watching 300 people give her a standing ovation. But something even more amazing was happening. People were pulling out their phones. She could see the little glowing screens throughout the audience as people recorded videos and took pictures. A year ago, this would have terrified her. Phones meant the internet, and the internet meant her carefully guarded secret would be out there for the whole world to see. But tonight, standing in this small community center, with tears streaming down her face, Elena realized she did not care anymore. When the applause finally died down, Elena walked off stage on shaking legs. Her classmates were waiting in the wings, all of them staring at her with expressions of shock and awe. "Elena," Mrs. Chen whispered, "who are you?" Before Elena could answer, Bob appeared beside her. He put a gentle hand on her shoulder and said quietly, "Why don't we give Elena a few minutes to collect herself? There are a lot of people who want to talk to her." He was right. As Elena tried to make her way through the backstage area, people kept stopping her. Everyone wanted to shake her hand, to tell her how amazing she was, to ask questions she was not ready to answer yet. "Miss, I have to ask," said a woman Elena recognized from the grocery store. "Are you a professional singer?" Because that was not amateur-level singing. "Where'd you learn to sing like that?" asked someone else. "Have you performed at real opera houses?" Elena felt overwhelmed by all the attention and questions. This was exactly what she had been afraid of for months. But instead of the panic she expected, she felt something else: relief. The secret she had been carrying was finally out, and the world had not ended. Bob rescued her by announcing that refreshments were being served in the lobby and gently steering Elena toward a quiet corner. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Honestly, terrified and relieved at the same time," Elena admitted. "I imagine so." "Elena, I think we need to talk. There are some things you should know." Over the next hour, as the crowd slowly dispersed and the other performers packed up their things, Bob told Elena what he had suspected for weeks. He had looked her up online after that first day when her voice had slipped out during the folk song practice. "Elena Vasquez Martinez," he said gently, "principal soprano at the Metropolitan Opera for 8 years. I found articles about your performances, reviews, calling you one of the finest coloratura sopranos of your generation." Elena felt her face flush, and you know about the rest too. The divorce, the scandal, why I had to leave. Bob nodded. "I know what the newspapers said. But Elena, I also know what I heard tonight. Whatever happened in New York, whatever mistakes you think you made, they do not change the fact that you have an extraordinary gift." "A gift that nearly destroyed my life," Elena said bitterly. "No," Bob said firmly. "People destroyed your life. Your ex-husband, the people who gossiped and judged instead of supporting you, they are the ones who caused the damage. Your voice, your music, that is pure. That is who you really are." As they talked, Elena found herself telling Bob the whole story. About her marriage to Ricardo, the famous conductor who had seemed like her perfect match. About how their professional partnership had turned into a personal relationship, and how she had thought they were building a life together. She told him about the other soprano, barely 25 years old, who had been having an affair with Ricardo for over a year. About the photographers who caught them together. About the headlines that made Elena look like a jealous, unstable wife instead of a betrayed woman. The worst part, Elena said, wiping her eyes, was not just losing Ricardo. It was losing my place in the opera world. Suddenly it was too much drama, too complicated. Directors who had begged me to perform for them stopped returning my calls. Bob listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making sympathetic sounds. When Elena finished her story, he was quiet for a long moment. "Elena," he finally said, Do you know what I saw tonight when you were singing? She shook her head. I saw someone finding herself again. Not Alina the opera star, not Alina the victim of scandal, but just Alina. A woman who loves music so much that she cannot help but share it, even when she is scared. By the time Alina made it home that night, her phone was buzzing constantly. The videos from the performance were already online, and they were spreading fast. She saw notifications from Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I had even uploaded a video to YouTube with the title "Mystery Woman Shocks Small Town with Incredible Opera Performance." Alina sat on her small couch and watched the video of herself singing. It was strange seeing it from the audience's perspective. She could see the exact moment when people realized they were hearing something extraordinary. She could see the tears on faces in the crowd, the amazement and joy. But what struck her most was how she looked on stage. She looked happy. For the first time in almost a year, she looked like herself again. Over the next few days, Alina's phone did not stop ringing. The videos had been shared thousands of times, and reporters were trying to track her down. Opera companies that had ignored her for months were suddenly sending messages, wanting to know if she was ready to return to performing. The most surprising call came from the Metropolitan Opera itself. The artistic director wanted to meet with her about returning for the next season. It was everything she had thought she wanted: vindication, proof that she was still valuable, still relevant. But Alina found herself hesitating. She walked through downtown Maplewood, past Tony's Bakery, where he still saved her a coffee and a smile every morning, past the post office where Mrs. Rodriguez always asked about her day, past the library where she had spent quiet afternoons. Reading. This small town had given her something she had never had in New York, a place where she was valued for who she was. It's not just what she could do. These people had accepted her when she was nobody special, just Alina, who enjoyed singing. That evening, Alina called Bob and asked if they could meet. They sat in the empty music classroom where it all began, and Alina told him about all the offers that were pouring in. "What do you want to do?" Bob asked. Alina was quiet for a long time. "I keep thinking about that first night I came to class. I was so lonely, so lost. And you all welcomed me without asking any questions. You gave me a place to belong. You will always have a place here," Bob said. "Actually," Alina said with a growing smile, "I was hoping you might be interested in a co-teacher, someone who could help with the more advanced students, maybe expand the program a little." Bob's eyes lit up. "Are you serious?" "I've had job offers from opera houses around the world this week. But you know what? I think I would rather help Mrs. Chen prepare for her daughter's wedding, teach Jake how to breathe properly, and convince Linda that her voice is more beautiful than she knows." 6 months later, the Maplewood Community Music Program had expanded into 3 different levels, with Alina teaching advanced students while Bob continued with the beginners. Alina had turned down the Met and every other major offer, though. She did agree to perform a few special concerts each year to raise money for the program. On quiet evenings, she still sometimes walked to the lake where she had first found her voice again. But now, she was not hiding or practicing in secret. She sang because she wanted to, because the music demanded to be shared, because she had finally found a place where her gift could flourish without fear. The girl who had once sung for presidents and critics now found her greatest joy in teaching a retired librarian to hit high notes and watching a young mechanic discover the power of his own voice. She had learned that home was not about the size of the stage or the fame of the venue. Home was about the people who loved you for who you were, not what you could do for them.